When a serious crime is committed and the police need all the help they can get, there's one group of people they turn to time after time.
Expert witnesses are the golden thread that runs through cases that every single conviction needs.
An extraordinary army of men and women with the expertise to reveal the hidden clues criminals have left behind.
There are so many important pieces of evidence: paint evidence, glass, fibre evidence.
They search harder and look deeper using the very latest techniques.
If I can work out how old those insects are, that's going to give me the minimum time since death.
This is the inside story of how science helped solve some of the UK's most complex cases.
It really was becoming the last throw of the dice.
Nothing's going to bring her back, but she'd had the justice that she rightly deserved.
This is the story of the expert witness. Today, we're in Wales to reveal how an expert witness helped solve 3 notorious cold cases after it seemed forensic science was getting nowhere.
It was the most hostile meeting I've ever had with the police.
I am not a murderer.
And forensic analysis by a gemstone expert uncovers the fatal flaw in a diamond investment scam that wiped out some people's life savings.
Some of the losses that they were facing were absolutely catastrophic.
DNA is not a bad place to start. It's just, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to go via something else.
I was aware that a number of experts had looked at these cases in the past, so I knew I was in for a difficult time.
Pembrokeshire, Wales, 2006. Detective Steve Wilkins has been assigned to run a new cold case investigation, Operation Ottawa. Its objective is to crack 3 serious and possibly connected crimes, each unsolved for at least a decade.
The double murder of Richard and Helen Thomas at Scoverson Park in 1985, the murders of Peter and Gwenda Dixon in 1989, and also an attack on 5 children in 1996.
There had been extensive investigations of all 3 cases over the years, but no one had been charged. The crimes became notorious and cast a shadow over this close-knit rural community. Now, Steve wanted to take an entirely fresh approach to the investigation. He began housing his dedicated team in a disused building at Pembroke Docks.
This is where Operation Ottawa was born. It's quite spooky being back here after all these years. 6 people came here. They were people that I knew would pay attention to detail, because at that stage it was mainly around identifying what we had available, what exhibits, what material was available.
Operation Ottawa's headquarters were at the centre of a small triangle where the 3 crimes took place. The first was the double murder of a local brother and sister in 1985.
A couple of miles that way towards Milford Haven, we have Scoverson Park, which is the scene where Richard and Helen Thomas were murdered.
During the crime, their manor house home, Scoverson Park, was set on fire. The most notorious case was 4 years later in 1989. 2 tourists were killed in an infamous attack that became known as the Coastal Path Murders.
Within 500 yards of us, Peter and Gwenda Dixon were confronted by a man with a sawn-off shotgun. They were robbed. Gwenda was sexually assaulted, and then they were shot 5 times.
Peter and Gwenda both died at the scene. Then, in 1996, in nearby Milford Haven, there was a 3rd crime.
5 children who were playing one night were confronted by a masked man with a double-barrel shotgun who robbed them.
2 of the girls were also sexually assaulted, For Steve, the close proximity of all three violent and unusual crimes was impossible to ignore.
The geography was a significant factor in linking the offences. Certain offenders have what we call anchor points, is that they feel safe in areas. They know the escape routes, they know how to get to areas, so they feel comfortable offending in that area. So for me, this was a local person.
One such suspect was John Cooper. He lived in the area, had carried out burglaries there, and had served time for armed robbery. Cooper's home had been thoroughly searched as part of the investigations into the robberies.
There was a lot of evidence taken from his house, but also outside his house and along the hedgerows were items of jewellery, gloves, which clearly he had discarded or he'd sorted through as he was leaving the scene and going back to his home address.
Steve had thousands of exhibits from the three crimes and still more from Cooper's burglaries. He had a hunch these exhibits had evidence to link all the cold cases and that forensic science could reveal it. He turned to Angela Gallup, but could offer only limited resources.
Steve Wilkins said that all he wanted us to do was just find him a golden nugget of DNA. He said, we haven't got very much money to spend on this case, but we desperately need to, solve it. And so just restrict yourself to DNA.
DNA was an investigative tool that had advanced greatly since the original inquiries into the three crimes. So Steve was hoping for a fast result.
In the late 80s, early 90s, you needed a large amount of blood, something the size of a 10p piece. But nowadays, you don't even need to be able to see the blood or the body fluid to get a result.
But months later, Angela's team had still found no DNA that linked any of the crimes.
With forensic science, sometimes you strike lucky straight away, and the thing that you examine gives you the result that you're looking for, which will sort out what you need it to sort out. But other times it takes a whole lot longer than that.
After a whole year and a half with no results and the cost of the investigation mounting, Steve was under pressure.
At that stage, I'm probably over £1 million then in relation to the forensic budget. I've got a police authority asking me questions. I've got chief officers asking me questions. And also, we need to come to a point where I felt that I wasn't sure we were getting actually the best out of the science.
He rang me one day and he said, you've been doing this case for 18 months. You haven't found anything. I'm going to take it off you and give it to someone else because I can't continue with you.
With the investigation at a stalemate, tensions between the detectives and expert witnesses were at breaking point. Steve called an emergency meeting.
It was the most hostile meeting I've ever had with the police. There was a whole team of them there. It was very much crunch time so far as our investigation was concerned. But I just was very keen that he and his colleagues understood the broader canvas that is forensic science.
It was a very frank exchange, I think. Angela felt that we'd kept her in what she calls DNA straitjacket.
I managed to persuade them just to give us a little bit more latitude and a little bit more funding to do some fibre work.
I think it was a very, very helpful meeting because it was quite clear that Angela had ideas, she was thinking outside the box.
Angela had staked her reputation on this new approach. Now she needed the very best fibre expert she could find and turned to expert witness Roger Robson.
I was aware that a number of experts had looked at these cases in the past, so I knew I was in for a difficult time.
Roger began with the Coastal Path Murders, in which Peter and Gwenda Dixon were killed. He asked for details of the exhibits recovered by the original investigation in 1989. Roger was looking for anything that might offer the chance of recovering fibres.
Steve's team came up with a list, and on that list were quite a number of branches that had been used to conceal Gwenda Dixon's body.
The killer had broken the branches, and Roger thought it possible the thorns could have snagged fibres from his clothes. So he began a forensic analysis.
There were these populations of dark blue acrylic fibres that we were finding repeatedly on the different branches. Well, what does that mean? The perpetrator was wearing gloves. So have any gloves actually been seized from this suspect's house? And they managed to collect and exhibit 11 different pairs of gloves. One by one, I eliminated them until I came up with one exhibit, which had the exhibit number BB109. That particular exhibit number will probably stick with me forever. When I looked at this glove, I found that the constituent fibres were a close match to the population of the fibres on the branches. But it was that one glove, BB109, that opened up the whole investigation.
The fibres linked Cooper and his glove to the coastal path murders of Peter and Gwenda Dixon in 1989. Now Roger needed to look for similar fibres connected to the other crimes. He turned first to the assault of the children at Milford Haven in 1996.
I'll look at the fibres on the victims of the assaults case from Milford Haven, and if they come out the same, then I know that these are most likely to have come from the same source. And lo and behold, next thing you find the match. That was quite mind-blowing, to be honest.
Roger was spectacular. It's significant when you get that sort of connection. This is quite clearly that the person wearing those gloves has come into contact with the victims.
That was just brilliant. It was concrete evidence of John Cooper's involvement, so it was extremely important.
For the first time, the team had forensic evidence to link 2 of the 3 cases. The investigation was back on track, with another breakthrough on the way.
It was microscopically searching some surface debris recovered from a pair of shorts from John Cooper's home address that we managed to notice not only the fibres aspect of it, but also we found a tiny flake of what looked like blood.
The shorts were from Cooper's house, but who did the blood belong to? There was only a tiny speck, but that was enough for forensic biologist Philip Avenel to begin a search for DNA.
We got the microscope out, we took the shorts out, very careful examination, and on the surface of the shorts, sort of around this area on the back of the leg, we found a very weak, dilute red stain, which had the appearance of blood. We did a KM test on the back of the shorts before we cut that out. The KM test, we take a piece of absorbent paper, we will fold it up just to give us a nice, neat corner to be able to pick anything up on. We'll then take our blood stain and we will rub the paper against it. Then we'll take our first chemical. There's 2 chemicals in the Castlemayor test. One of them is hydrogen peroxide, and so when you add that to the blood, it acts like an enzyme and it actually breaks down the hydrogen peroxide to release oxygen. And when we add the Castlemayor reagent, if there's an abundance of oxygen present, then it will turn pink. And you'll see a purple coloration change there where the blood flake was. We cut that out and put that in for DNA testing. That also came back matching Peter Dixon. The probability for that particular DNA result we had was less than 1 in a billion.
Fibres linked a glove to the coastal path murders and to the Milford Haven assaults. Blood connected a pair of shorts to the coastal path murders. Both were found in John Cooper's house. But could forensic analysis link the same shorts to the third crime, the Scoverston murders?
The shorts suddenly became a treasure trove in relation to forensic science. We'd already got a connection to the murders of the Dixons, and of course now we were on a rich vein of hits, or forensic hits, in relation to fibre evidence. And in the pocket of the shorts, they recovered a clump of fibres.
Roger Robson studied the fibres and compared them to exhibits from all 3 crimes. He discovered they were a match for a sock worn by Richard Thomas, one of the victims in the 1985 Scoverston murders.
What we did find was a little population of polyester fibres, and he probably moved Richard Thomas by the feet and then afterwards put his hand in the pocket of the shorts, and that evidence stayed within those shorts all that time.
Angela's promise to deliver results using forensic fibre evidence was paying off.
The links started coming in, I mean, in a way that absolutely staggered us. And they were linking the victims, you know, with the hedgerow items and with John Cooper's house directly and via the hedgerow items. We had enormous numbers. It was a myriad of textile fibre links.
Evidence was building up against John Cooper, but Steve had a hunch there was more. Police were in possession of a shotgun used by Cooper in an armed robbery. The children assaulted in Milford Haven said their attacker also carried a shotgun.
One or two of the victims that were attacked in the field near Milford Haven described the fact that the gun had been painted black. When we started looking at it in earnest, we took it out of its bag and we noticed in the bottom of the bag that quite a lot of the black paint had started to flake off the gun. So we thought, well, we'll have a quick look at those. And it was when our brilliant searcher, April Robson, started looking at the flakes from the bottom of the bag, and she popped them under the low-power microscope, and she noticed that there was a reddish cast to the inner surface of them. In other words, the surface that would have been in contact with the gun barrels. And so she tested that, obviously, immediately for blood, and it gave us a positive result. We did DNA profiling on that, and that showed that it very likely to have come from Peter Dixon. And we then went back to the gun and found some more blood, actually on the gun itself. And that was also Peter Dixon's.
It was the final piece of the jigsaw to show all three crimes were linked and that Cooper was responsible for them all.
Suddenly, we had the murder weapon. And this was a gun for which he'd already served a sentence, which he'd used in a previous armed robbery, and where the MO was very, very similar to the Ottawa offences. So to put that in the middle of the other evidence, it was crucial and significant.
This footage shows the moment detectives apprehended John Cooper.
Serial killer John Cooper is finally arrested.
While in police custody, he continued to maintain his innocence.
I am not a murderer. I don't care whether you believe it or not. I am not a murderer.
But with their wealth of forensic evidence, Steve and his team didn't need a confession. In 2011, 5 years after Steve Wilkins launched Operation Ottawa, John Cooper was convicted of the 1985 murders of Richard and Helen Thomas, the 1989 murders of Peter and Gwenda Dixon, and the 1996 assault at gunpoint of children in Milford Haven.
2 decades after the murders, Cooper has finally been brought to justice. The judge told him his crimes were of such evil wickedness that life in prison would mean just that.
Roger and Angela, for me, they will always be my heroes. They were the people that we worked very, very close with for a number of years. And they were the ones that, because of their training, because of their professionalism, because of their expertise, were able to provide me with the evidence to put a case before a jury and reach a successful conclusion.
The work was extremely satisfying. In fact, I think it was probably the most satisfying case of my career.
We did a jolly good job. There was a few drinks to celebrate the outcome at the end of the day.
We gave this part of the world back to the local community because they can confidently now go out and say, well, the person responsible will never see the light of day again. So for me, it was very important, and very important to local community and economy as well.
Diamonds are beautiful and also very valuable. So the job of the expert is to actually determine what the fair value is, and it seems the criminal's intent is to overinflate it and thereby cheat the unsuspecting victim.
In 2014, gemologist Richard Taylor is contacted by Trading Standards. They want him to investigate what they believe is an unusual scam involving precious gemstones. A company called Ethical Elegance has convinced amateur wine collectors to trade expensive bottles of wine for rare coloured diamonds. Ethical Elegance promised massive returns.
All of the victims of this case had invested in fine wines. But most of the investors were at a loss to know exactly what to do, whether to keep the wines, whether to sell them. Out of the blue, they received a phone call talking to them about investing in coloured diamonds. The salesman would say to them, we have this wonderful opportunity where if you transfer the wines to us, we can get a valuation and sell them, but we won't give you the proceeds. We will actually use those proceeds to buy a coloured diamond. It was this two-stage process to convert their wine into cash.
14 wine collectors agreed to hand over their very expensive wines. One investor handed over wine worth more than £85,000. But months later, few had received their diamonds in return. Those that had were suspicious of their true value and began to think they had been scammed. It's something Carla Goodfellow at the Birmingham Assay Office is hearing about more and more.
The scams and frauds that we have seen involving gemstones and jewellery, definitely from our experience, targeted vulnerable people who really are using their life savings, maybe their inheritance that they're hoping to pass on to their family, or actually putting them into severe financial difficulties themselves.
But was Ethical Elegance scamming its customers? Some did receive diamonds, so expert witness Richard Taylor ran a series of tests to see what those gems were worth. He began by determining if they were natural or grown in a lab, as he demonstrates on these sample stones.
We're going to put 3 stones in, and you're just going to see the results that we get. And it's actually the phosphorescence, which is the key test that this is using. So the first image we see of the 3 stones is just simple fluorescence. So we're exciting it with UV light, and we're seeing any visual response. You could think that actually testing a diamond was a simple process, but actually it's all more like doing a jigsaw puzzle. It's that challenge of actually working through the problem. The top diamond is phosphorescing in a bright blue colour, and actually that's characteristic of a synthetic diamond.
A second test, shown here on another sample gem, assesses the colour quality of the diamond to reveal whether it's natural or synthetic.
On here we've got a red diamond. It's held in blue tack so that we don't let any of the other light get through, only light that's passed through the diamond. We're pouring the liquid nitrogen into the container, which will cool down the diamond. But what's really interesting and special about those graphs are those individual little peaks can tell me, one peak can tell me whether it's a synthetic or whether it's a natural. This is quite a smooth curve, which is, in its own way, for a red diamond, somewhat suspicious. We can identify this is not a natural coloured stone.
I think the prevalence now of diamonds which are not diamonds has very much gone up. Synthetic and laboratory grown are probably one of the industry's biggest issues at the moment. It's only by using specialist equipment that you can actually detect the diamond is laboratory grown rather than natural.
When Richard examined the gems sent to customers by Ethical Elegance, he confirmed they were, at least, natural diamonds. But were they as valuable as the thousands of pounds worth of wine people had exchanged them for? There was one obvious cause for concern.
Firstly was the size of the stones. The stones that had been supplied to the individuals were quite small stones, and to be worth 10, 20, 30,000 pounds, they would have had to have been larger.
Then there was the colouring, a significant factor in determining a diamond's worth.
Most diamonds go from a kind of faint yellow colour through to an absolutely white, colourless stone. And in that range, the most valuable is the white stone. But the really, really valuable stones are the ones that have other colours. And if the quality of the colour is really good, and if the size of the diamond is even quite modest, it can be an unbelievably valuable and expensive stone.
Ethical Elegance promised its customers diamonds of rare and valuable colouring, so Richard assessed each stone one by one.
A lot of the diamonds were actually yellows, which the yellows do have values, but they're out of all the colours, they're probably the least valuable. So you've got lots of small yellow diamonds, and you just looked at them and thought, never in a month of Sundays am I going to be able to find 10, 20, 50,000 pounds worth of value in these stones.
Richard's conclusion, the diamonds customers received were worth only a fraction of the value of the wine they had exchanged them for.
The ballpark was between 6 and 10% of the estimated value. So a £10,000 investment, they were getting between £600 and £1,000 back.
Richard's evidence left trading standards in no doubt. Ethical Elegance was scamming its customers. The company was closed down, and in 2016, its owner, Craig O'Driscoll, was tried for fraudulent trading. Faced with the weight of Richard Taylor's evidence, O'Driscoll pleaded guilty. He was given a suspended sentence and disqualified from trading for 13 years. But for some of his victims, the devastating consequences of O'Driscoll's scam will be even longer lasting.
Some of the losses that they were facing were absolutely catastrophic. There were several individuals where literally it was their pension, their whole pension had been invested in these wines.
I think a lot of people are led to believe that maybe jewellery and precious gemstones can be a good investment. I have to say, frauds and scams that involve diamonds or gemstones, precious metals, is much more common than we would like it to be. And it is a real shame that people are being scammed in this way.